Hello and welcome to Real Cheating Story. I must be out of my mind, I thought to myself as I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I almost changed my mind, but I didn't. What I saw was a middle-aged woman with long red hair and big green eyes, now narrowed with determination. I looked down at my body, still firm and well-proportioned, and ran my hands sensually down my side and over my hips. I decided to keep the black lacy bra and matching panties I had chosen earlier, then reached for my jeans. I slipped them on, with a fleeting thought reminding me that I needed to press Jeff's slacks and shirts before putting them away. I pushed that thought aside, it had no place in what I was doing. With some effort, I fastened the button and let out a deep breath. I needed to do that just to button these jeans. I knew they were a size too small, but Jeff liked them, and so did I. The unwelcome thought crept into my mind again as I looked at the curve of my hips and the snug fit of the jeans on my thighs, especially where my legs met. I liked how I looked in them. I knew I should have either let them out or donated them, but these jeans were exactly what I wanted to wear today. I told myself, almost defensively, that Harris would like them too. I blushed at my own thoughts before pulling an oversized top over my head to cover the fitted blouse. I made sure the neckline was snug, hiding any hint of white, and that the bottom hung down over the snug contours of my rear. I looked at myself once more, turning to view all angles, and decided it was perfect. The jeans were a bit tight, but Jeff wouldn't notice with this top, and he had no way of knowing what lay beneath. He would assume I was just wearing my usual jeans and sweatshirt. My androgynous look, though a brief flash of irritation crossed my mind, it quickly faded. I calmed my thoughts and walked downstairs to find Jeff, my husband of 16 years, and our two children, Amy and Bradley, both 13 years old, sitting together in the kitchen discussing their afternoon plans. They were fraternal twins and looked nothing alike. Amy was pleased with that result, while Brad didn't have strong feelings either way. In my eyes, they were both beautiful and perfect. Right now, they were all smiling and sharing a secret among themselves, which wasn't unusual for our family. We didn't have real secrets, our family was well-adjusted and healthy, and we discussed our problems openly. But just the hint of a secret was enough to spark some playful arguments, just good family fun. I sat down and listened for a few minutes without paying much attention to their conversation. I just wanted to enjoy my family once more before doing what I had planned for the afternoon. First, I looked at Amy, the daughter I loved without reservation. She took after me in appearance, tall for her age, likely to remain so through high school. She was cute, with her red hair worn long and straight, and her bangs giving her large green eyes a constantly surprised look. She was well proportioned for her height, avoiding the skinny look some teens maintain into their later years. To top it off, she was bright and intelligent. Brad was more like his father. Jeff and Brad were both short and stocky. Jeff was just 3 inches taller than I was, and Brad was not far behind. Jeff was well built, with a broad chest and shoulders, narrow hips, and strong, muscular legs. Brad still had some growing to do and lacked the strong definition that would come with maturity. Both had light brown hair and gray eyes, and they shared the same lively sense of humor. While Brad's humor sometimes drove his sister crazy, she knew it was just in good fun. I loved and treasured it. When they finally slowed down, I got their attention and asked to review my list once more. This list included things each needed that I would pick up on my monthly trip to the mall. I had always loved shopping, while Brad and Jeff disliked it. Amy would go, but only with her friends. Shopping with her mother wasn't cool. So, I planned my trips to go alone, armed with my list. Today was a bit different, but none of them had any clue just how different it would be. They only knew that this was my routine, and they accepted it. I relied on it as I began to review with each one what they needed. As I went through this task, I mentally reviewed the items I had already purchased. I had started this list earlier and had visited the mall several times over the past 2 weeks to pick up as many items as I could in advance. The twins had added a few last-minute items to the list over the past several days, but that was manageable. I planned to spend at least half an hour at the mall before heading to my main destination. I could complete my shopping in that time. As they finished discussing their special requests, I felt a pang of guilt that I quickly set aside. I had made my decision and wasn't going to change my mind now. This afternoon had been planned for almost a month, and I felt more than ready. I had started planning it almost immediately after the last one. Only one other person knew about my plans for this Saturday afternoon, and he wasn't part of my family. The decision to do this hadn't been easy. It took a lot of inner debate and persuasion to finally decide that it was something I really wanted to do. Even after making the decision, I continued to wrestle with myself. Just this morning, before I started getting dressed, I was still trying to decide. I almost backed out, but a comment from Jeff made me more certain. It was a small comment, but it felt significant to me. Jeff hadn't been very open with me recently, which I partly blamed on myself, but I felt I had my reasons, and Jeff wasn't willing to discuss them. We hadn't been close for some time, and our interactions were minimal. I had gradually convinced myself that everything wrong was his fault. This morning was a case in point. I had suggested ordering dinner so I wouldn't have to cook, and Jeff offered to handle the cooking instead. For some reason, I snapped at him, demanding he just follow my request. After a moment of silence, he agreed but walked away and went downstairs. I was still upset by his response, though I wasn't entirely sure why. It seemed like everything he did lately was enough to irritate me. As I gathered my things for the trip to the mall, my mind wandered. I waved distractedly at the kids when they said goodbye and didn't recall if Jeff said anything. I was lost in thought as I backed out of the driveway and drove toward the shopping mall a few miles from our home. I was reflecting on my life and marriage, trying to justify my planned actions. Jeff and I had married in the fall of 1991. Jeff was a chemical engineer working for Powers Group, a reputable engineering consulting firm. He was one of many young engineers working his way up the management ladder. Jeff was among the better ones, and his future looked bright. At 27, he was already a group leader with prospects for further promotions. He was handsome, witty, and eager for fun. I met him at a local bar while out with some colleagues. I was a secretary working for a law firm specializing in corporate cases. I had a degree in languages and could translate German and Spanish to English. I was 25, recently out of a long but unsatisfying relationship with a man known more for his looks and rumors about his abilities. Our breakup was mutual and left me with plenty of free time. Going out with friends was one way to fill it. I met Jeff while waiting at the bar for drinks. I was buying around and reached for my wallet when I accidentally bumped into him. I apologized, but when I turned, his grin surprised me. He smiled wider when he saw me and said, "I'd say I'm sorry, but that would be a lie." It was actually quite pleasant. I was ready with a witty reply, but after looking into his worn gray eyes, I simply smiled back and said, "I'm glad you enjoyed it." It was my pleasure. He laughed, a sound that really caught my interest, and I asked for his help in getting the drinks back to my table. He followed, and after setting the drinks down, I turned to him and extended my hand. "Hi, my name is Samantha Bradley, but most of my friends call me Sam." He replied, "Nice to meet you, Sam. I'm Jeff Watson. Would you care to join me? I'm with a group, but we can find a table for the two of us." I was surprised by his directness but quickly agreed. "I'd be happy to. Let me tell my friends, and then we can find a table." I turned back to my group, and their smiles indicated they were supportive of my decision. I spoke to Lucy, the friend I was most likely to leave with, and let her know I could handle it. She laughed and gave me a friendly pat on the back. Jeff then walked with me to an empty table, and once I was settled, he went off to chat with his friends. He returned, and we spent the rest of the evening together, marking the beginning of our courtship. Over the next 6 months, we became close, then moved in together. We found a small apartment and began our life as a couple. It wasn't long before we decided to make it official and got married. Both Jeff and I continued working in our respective jobs, and we started saving for a house. Jeff was promoted twice and became a regional manager, overseeing a team of 5 engineers. His career was progressing well. I continued working at the law firm, and while the work was consistent, the pay helped us move closer to our goal of buying a home. After 2 years, I shared the news with Jeff that I was pregnant. He was thrilled and couldn't wait to tell everyone. I was happy for him, but also preparing for the transition to stay home with the baby. We had agreed that I would be a stay-at-home parent for the first 5 years, and Jeff was supportive of that decision. We found a house, made an offer, and once accepted, became homeowners. The house was lovely with 3 bedrooms and a large yard, complete with a swing set left by the previous owners. We made the yard safe for toddlers, and once the twins were born, we set up the nursery, which was perfectly equipped. Our life together was filled with love and affection. Jeff and I expressed our love daily. I prepared his favorite meals and made sure he had his preferred beer for the weekends. He sent me flowers regularly and was always interested in how my day went and how the kids were doing. We spent our evenings together, and our physical connection was a cherished part of our relationship. Jeff balanced his demanding job with family life, working from home when necessary but always prioritizing family time. As the kids grew older, I felt a growing restlessness and asked Jeff if I could return to work. He was supportive, and we made a plan that accommodated both our needs. I applied to my old firm and a few other places and received offers from 2. After discussing it with Jeff, I chose to return to my old firm due to its flexible hours. The decision wasn't driven by money, as Jeff's position provided financial stability. I started back at work when the twins were 9 years old. Reflecting on that time, I believe it marked a shift in our relationship. Returning to work brought a new set of challenges, and balancing my job with home responsibilities became more demanding. I had less time for special meals and ensuring the fridge was stocked with Jeff's favorite items. Weekends were filled with catching up on tasks, and we had less time for just relaxing and talking. Despite these changes, we worked hard to maintain our intimacy. We understood the importance of staying close and preserving our connection. Some nights, we would simply fall asleep in each other's arms. For a long time, everything felt steady in our relationship until about a year ago, when I remember a particular night vividly. I had been working on a major case with a lot of critical translations, so important that I had to spend more and more time researching technical terms and scientific notation. It was taking up all my days, and I had to extend it into my evenings. I would bring work home, rush to fix a quick dinner, and then nag the twins and Jeff into cleaning the dishes in the kitchen while I rushed off to the small den to continue my research online. This routine continued for some time, and my evenings became filled with work. At bedtime, I was often much later coming to bed, and Jeff was frequently asleep when I did. On those occasions when he wasn't, he would reach for me, and I would push him away in irritation. I told myself that he wasn't thinking about me, only himself. Why couldn't he see that I was tired and needed to sleep so I could continue working the next day like he did on his job? He said little those nights and rolled over to sleep. I never thought much about it, just happy that I could get to sleep. Then one night, when I had come to bed very late, exhausted and barely able to make it up the steps, Jeff reached for me as I slid under the covers. I didn't react, too tired even to push his hand away. At first, the sensation was pleasant, and I just lay there enjoying it until irritation rushed back. I needed sleep, why couldn't he leave me alone? I reacted in anger and pushed his hands away, then said, "Damn it, Jeff, I need to get some sleep. Can't you keep your hands to yourself? Just leave me alone." With a weak flash of guilt, I continued mumbling, "Maybe this weekend we can get together." I rolled over, put the pillow over my head, and tried to get to sleep. My heart was pounding in anger, and my gut was roiling with burning acid, but it wasn't long before I fell asleep and slept soundly all night and well into the following morning. I woke late, rolled over to find Jeff already up and gone. I looked at the clock to see it was past 7:30, and I was going to be late if I didn't get started. I jumped out of bed, got dressed, and ran downstairs to find no coffee. I muttered a few unflattering words about Jeff's lack of consideration under my breath. Both kids were up, dressed, and ready for school, but they didn't say much to me. I didn't notice, so wrapped up was I in my own concerns. That night, when Jeff came home, I noticed that he was very quiet. Not only that, but both Brad and Amy were also sort of withdrawn and seemed uneasy. I asked them what the problem was, but both denied any concerns. I decided to let it go and ask Jeff after they went up. I went into the den and worked on the translation still outstanding until very late. By the time I went out to find Jeff, he had already gone up to bed. I decided it was time to talk to him, so I turned off the lights and followed. I wasn't even aware of what time it was. The first thing I noticed when I did go up was that Jeff was sitting on the bed but hadn't undressed. That was very strange, as he had obviously been up for some time, but he was just sitting there, no book open or anything keeping his attention. He just looked at me as I walked into the room. I stopped and looked back, trying to fight my rising irritation. I finally asked him, forgetting that this was exactly what I wanted to do in the first place, ironic not to me at the time, "What's going on, Jeff? You've been so quiet all evening, and so have the twins. You were gone this morning without waking me, and you didn't even make coffee. The kids were quiet this morning as well. What's going on, Jeff? Why would I wake you, Sam? Didn't you lash out at me the night before about keeping my hands to myself and not letting you get any sleep? I was just so tired, Jeff. I could hardly keep my eyes open. I just wanted to go to sleep, that's all. I didn't mean to yell at you. It was just that I was so tired. I'm sorry I upset you. I know you were tired, Sam. I guess your job is so important that you just forget that we need time together too. Every evening now, it seems like you just go into that den, and that's the last we see of you. We just can't compete with your precious job anymore." The sudden surge of anger caught me by surprise, and before I could control myself, I said, "Well, pardon me. I guess I should just forget my job, the people who depend on me, and say that my husband needs attention, so I have to stop everything and give it to him. Well, guess again." Before the echo of the last words faded, Jeff rose, pushed past me, and went downstairs without a word. I stood there, shaken by my own words and not sure what had just happened. I was stunned and unable to move. After what seemed like ages, I finally walked over to the bed and just collapsed. My head was spinning, and my mind was in turmoil. I was shocked at myself for my outburst and ashamed as well. I tried to understand what I had done and why I had done it, but nothing came to me. I was unsure of what to do. Should I go downstairs and apologize to Jeff, or should I just wait until he came upstairs and then apologize? I undressed, got ready for bed, and waited for Jeff to come up. I would apologize and try to make it up to him. What I had said was inexcusable, that much I knew. I would lie here and wait for him, that was my last thought until the alarm woke me the next morning. I rolled over and turned off the alarm before the memory of last night came rushing back. I looked over at the spot where my husband had slept and saw that the covers were undisturbed. Jeff had not come to bed at all. I got up, threw on a robe, and ran downstairs to find him, but he had already left for work an hour early. I worried all day at work, but by the time I was ready to go home, the urgency had subsided. I apologized that evening when Jeff returned from work, and he seemed to accept it, but he was never the same afterward. I believe that's when things began to change. As I remember it now, it was almost 3 more months before I finished that job, and after that, things never seemed to get back to where they were. That was about a year ago, give or take a month. Yes, that's when it all changed. Harris Fowler was a law student and a summer intern at the firm when I first noticed him. He was no more than 21 or 22, trying to get his foot in the door by working for several of the partners as a clerk. He was eager and quick to learn, and I was fascinated by him. He introduced himself one afternoon and asked if I could help him with a translation. I told him I could find some time later that afternoon and for him to gather his materials so we could handle it quickly. He did so, and I was able to help him. He was grateful, and after that, he rarely missed a day without saying something nice to me. I began to look forward to his short visits as a pleasant part of my day. As time passed, Harris became familiar with most of the staff, and he and I spent time together when we both had some free time. I learned a lot about him. He told me that his family had money, but he wanted to make it on his own. He was finishing his undergraduate work this year and would go on to law school next term. He was cute and very interesting, over 6 feet tall, slim build, with a handsome face and dark brown hair that was always falling over his eyes. His blue eyes were captivating, his gaze so intense that you felt like you were the center of his world. I became aware that he was flirting with me almost from the start, and I found it flattering. I was confused since I was at least 18 years older than he was, but that difference didn't seem to bother him. I was almost old enough to be his mother, but he never treated me that way. It was never platonic, and it certainly didn't bother me. Our flirting became more overt, and I admit to being a part of it. I just told myself it was harmless and would lead to nothing. That was where I was as my life with Jeff continued to deteriorate. We had not been intimate for at least 3 months. We seemed fine when the kids were present, but after they went to bed, it was almost silent. We had sex a few times earlier, but that just stopped, and we both knew it was not making love. We hardly talked about anything other than necessary matters, and we shared no intimate moments, either in bed or out. It was no longer my job that was keeping us apart, it had become almost a habit now. We never talked about it or discussed our marriage or its crisis. I did discuss it with Harris on several occasions, and my lack of a sex life did come up. Why I would discuss my marriage with someone like Harris was a mystery I didn't fully understand, but that's exactly what I did. I discussed it with this young man rather than with my husband. I knew that Jeff had tried several times to get me to talk about it, but I had dismissed his concerns as trivial. That was when I started down this slippery slope toward infidelity. As things with Harris continued to develop at work, my 40th birthday was approaching in a month. Jeff mentioned it one evening when we were with the kids, and I just dismissed it as inconsequential. Jeff asked me what I would like and if I wanted to do anything special. I thought about it and decided that I wanted nothing more than to ignore it. I told him so and made him promise not to do anything with the kids to celebrate. He tried to discuss it, but I was not in the mood and snapped at him. He stopped talking about it and seemed angry when he said he wouldn't mention it again. Both Amy and Brad seemed upset as well, but I didn't pay much attention. I simply forgot about it, as I had been doing lately. As my birthday approached, I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary at home, so my wishes were being honored, but I didn't know how I felt about it. That was what I wanted, wasn't it? Not to do anything? At the time, I was discussing it with Harris, and I made it seem like Jeff had just pushed me aside and decided to do nothing. How did I come to that? I didn't have a clue. I suppose in my own clouded thinking, I was trying to minimize my husband and maximize my own suffering while drawing Harris into my illusion. I think I had already begun to rationalize my feelings of abandonment and place the blame on my husband. I knew that none of it was real, but in my mind, it all began to build up, and my resentment grew. I used my relationship with Harris to vent my anger and frustrations. Harris was a perfect outlet for my resentments. He listened, sympathized, and made flattering comments about my beauty, claiming he would never desert me as Jeff had. He never missed a chance to criticize Jeff or build me up as a desirable woman. Despite being much younger than me, he said he understood me and my needs, and told me that girls his age were shallow and only interested in fun. I was more mature and understood what was real. By the end of the month, before my birthday, Jeff and I had discussed the idea of meeting outside work. I mentioned my monthly mall trip and asked if he would like to meet me for a drink afterward. He agreed, and we made plans. That Saturday, I had my list and was moving quickly through the mall, familiar with all the stores. I usually enjoyed this time to myself, especially lately. Although I was shopping for all of us, I was alone and loved browsing the store windows without having to hurry or adhere to someone else's schedule. I was almost finished when I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to see Harris standing behind me. I smiled as a jolt of pleasure went through me. I was happy to see him, and we chatted as I moved toward my next stop. I went in with Harris right beside me, and I was pleased that this young man was so intent on being with me. After the first store, where I found all my items, the fun of sharing my choices with someone who was interested was a pleasure. The afternoon passed quickly, and when I was finished, I noticed that the time had flown by. It was already 4:30, and I had to leave to make it home in time for dinner. I reluctantly told Harris that our plans for drinks would have to wait. He walked out with me and helped me carry my purchases to the car. Once there, I loaded the trunk and shut the lid. As I turned, I moved right into Harris's outstretched arms. He pulled me tight against him and kissed me with such passion that I didn't even resist. We kissed for several minutes right there in the parking lot, and I felt his arousal pressing against my stomach. I enjoyed the feeling and wondered what it would look like, so young and eager. I finally pushed him back and looked at him in surprise. Harris took both of my hands in his and looked back at me. "Stay with me, Sam. I'll get us a room so we can be together. I want to be with you so badly. Please, Sam, stay." I was shocked by his suggestion, but the idea began to pull at me. I found myself wanting to be with him, but I knew that Jeff and the kids were expecting me home. If I stayed, they would worry and call me to find out where I was. I had no reason to stay away, and no excuse that would satisfy Jeff. I had to be sure he couldn't find out if I did stay. "No, I can't do this now. Please, Harris, let me think. I can't do this today or anytime soon without proper plans. I'm married, and it's not so simple for me. I have people who are expecting me. Let me go now, and I'll talk to you at work next week. Just let it be for now, but I will think about it. I want this too." Without waiting for his reply, I hurried to the driver's side door, slid in, and shut the door behind me. I started the engine and backed out quickly, almost without looking. Fortunately, I was clear and drove away, not looking back. I drove home with my packages, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, my mind had calmed. I was able to spend the remaining weekend with my family without any suspicion. If I had even noticed, I would have found Jeff not paying much attention to me. We had drifted so far apart, and I hadn't seen it. In the following weeks, I talked with Harris and convinced him that I was still considering his suggestion. We maintained our usual routine and went to lunch on several occasions. We kissed several times, each time more intense than before, and my need to be with him increased. During our kisses, there was more body contact, and each time I could clearly feel his arousal. He even touched me in intimate ways through our clothes. At the end of that month, I found myself becoming excited just at the sight of him. I finally came up with the idea of meeting him one afternoon on the Saturday of my monthly shopping trip. The idea of purchasing most of the items in advance, a few at a time, came from Harris. He suggested I get the list started early and buy items as needed. That way, my trip would be no different than usual, and I would have more time to be with Harris. I agreed to do that and, over the next 2 weeks, bought almost all of the items on the list. Before that Saturday, Harris told me he had reserved a room in a motel a block away from the mall. We planned to meet, complete the few remaining tasks, and then drive to the motel in separate cars. I agreed, and our plans were set. My daydreaming was interrupted by my arrival at the mall. Once again, I questioned if this was what I really wanted to do. I assured myself with a firm yes and drove into the mall parking lot, making my way to the section outside the Macy's store. I spotted Harris's bright red Mazda convertible and parked next to it. He waved, walked around his car, and slid into the seat beside me. He leaned over and pulled me close, kissing me passionately. I returned his kiss, parting my lips to allow his tongue to explore mine. We were careful not to be too overt in public, and soon we broke apart and walked together into the mall. I completed my shopping swiftly with Harris by my side. When I checked off the last item on my list, he leaned down and kissed me. "Okay, you know where to go." "I'm so eager I can't wait any longer." "I'll see you there." With that, he spun around and nearly ran out of the store, laughing. I paid for my purchases and headed to my car, where I placed the bags in the trunk and started the engine. I sat there for a few minutes, talking to myself one last time about whether I wanted to go through with this. My internal debate was brief, and before I had a chance to second-guess myself, I drove to the Hargrove Motel and around to the back, to room 158, the number Harris had whispered to me. I parked in front of that room, grabbed the small bag I had packed, and knocked on the door. Harris answered almost immediately, pulling me inside and laughing. I glanced around quickly to make sure no one was watching before the door closed behind us. Once inside, Harris took the lead, and for the next few minutes, his attention was all on me, with gentle touches and affectionate kisses. It felt like a high school romance, full of excitement and spontaneity. I barely had a moment to second-guess my actions before his warmth made all my doubts fade away. I helped him with my clothes. The next thing I noticed was how similar his presence felt to Jeff's. It seemed many men shared a similar build. Harris didn't last long. After a while, he paused and lay back to catch his breath. Once he had recovered, he said, "Wow, that was amazing. I've never experienced something quite like that before." I lay there, feeling like things weren't quite finished while he seemed content. "Not so fast," I thought to myself. I propped myself up on my elbows and looked at him. "You may be ready to rest, but I'm not done yet. You forgot something important, and I expect you to make it right, now." I guided him to help me feel more satisfied, and once I felt content, we could continue at a slower pace, just the way I wanted. Harris took the hint and followed my instructions. I went to the bathroom to clean up, determined that no evidence of this encounter would leak out. There was no way I wanted my husband to find out. When I returned, Harris was lying back, ready for more. "Come over here, and this time, you can take the lead." I smiled at the prospect. His youth had a significant advantage over my husband. He could be ready quickly. I slowly rose and then lowered myself repeatedly, savoring the sensation as it spread over my body. I enjoyed controlling the pace and ensuring my satisfaction. We spent the next 4 hours in that room, exploring every position we could think of. I was driven by a sense of urgency and had to experience everything I could imagine. As I cleaned up, reapplied my lipstick and makeup, I noticed it was already past 6 o'clock. I almost panicked since I usually came home by 4 o'clock or 4:30. I hadn't noticed how the time had flown by. I reached for my phone but decided it was too late to call. I hurried out of the bathroom, now fully dressed and ready to go home. I would need to come up with a story to explain my absence. As I entered the room, Harris was dressed too. He smiled at me and said, "This afternoon was the best day of my life. You were fantastic, and I hope we can do this again soon." I found myself asking the same question as I reapplied my lipstick. Should I do this again? I examined my feelings and sensed a twinge of guilt trying to emerge. I decided I needed time to answer his question. "I don't know, Harris. This was great, and I enjoyed the time with you, but I'm married, and I'm unsure about how I feel about cheating on my husband." Harris tried to convince me it was just sex and didn't affect my marriage, but I wasn't certain. We parted ways, and I promised to talk to him next week. He waved, and I drove home, my mind preoccupied with the afternoon's events and the experiences I had. I knew that I didn't love Harris and never could. I did love Jeff, but we were having problems that we needed to work on. I enjoyed my time with Harris, but there was little difference between the experience with him and with Jeff. Jeff and I had been intimate, or at least we had before the recent issues. Harris had more stamina, but Jeff had more finesse. The only reason the afternoon with Harris had been enjoyable was the thrill of its secrecy. My final thought as I pulled into the driveway was whether it was worth risking my marriage for this. I walked into the house, still absorbed in thoughts about Harris and the time we spent together. So caught up was I in my reflections that I didn't notice the empty boxes in the garage, the mess in the kitchen, or the stacks of dishes in the sink. As I moved through the kitchen and down the hallway, I overlooked the extra chairs in the living room and the banner stretched across the family room over the fireplace. My mind elsewhere, I went upstairs to the bedroom to change out of the tight jeans and see-through blouse before Jeff saw me. I hummed to myself, still feeling the pleasure of my afternoon with Harris, the heat of our time together making my face flush. I also felt a soreness between my legs, and I knew I would feel it more intensely the next day. I thought it was fortunate Jeff and I hadn't been intimate for a while. He wouldn't likely notice anything out of the ordinary. As I entered the bedroom, I nearly ran into Jeff standing just inside the doorway. I stopped, confused, as I took in his presence. "Jeff, you scared me. What are you doing standing there?" Panic set in as I realized my blouse was half off and my tight jeans were visible. I quickly pulled my top down and tried to push past him, but he blocked my way and asked the question I wasn't expecting. "Where were you? Where have you been, and who are you with?" Jeff's voice was harsh, and it took my breath away. I stepped back, staring into his eyes, which were cold and unyielding. They were the light gray eyes I knew but seemed darker, more steel gray than usual. I wondered why his eyes were so different. As his words sunk in, I gasped, thinking he knew. But he couldn't know. I had been so careful. I never mentioned Harris, our lunches, or our time together at work. He couldn't have any idea about my afternoon. He must just be upset about how late I was. I needed to deflect and distract him. "What are you talking about, Jeff?" "I was at the mall all afternoon. The packages are in the car. Could you or Brad get them from the trunk?" I was by myself, as always. "I'm sorry I'm late, but I had trouble finding everything and decided to grab a bite to eat before coming home. That's all." Jeff didn't say anything but grabbed me by the hand and dragged me from the room, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. I tried to resist, but he was relentless, and I was almost afraid to say anything. I stumbled after him, my heart pounding and my breathing labored. A deep dread settled in my stomach. Jeff stopped in the middle of the kitchen and pointed. "Look. What do you see?" I looked around and noticed the dishes, boxes, and the printed labels on some boxes indicating Prentice Catering. There were containers of food and desserts, some stacked inside others. The food was spoiled. I looked around and saw the chairs and the banner from the kitchen. It became clear that there was a party planned for me. I had been with Harris while everyone was here celebrating my birthday. How could I explain this? What could I say? Why did Jeff and the twins do this after I told them not to? Of course, they would still try to celebrate my birthday. They loved me. Oh God, what had I done? Tears started to flow, the weight of my betrayal hitting me hard. "Jeff, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about the party. It was a mistake, and I'm so sorry. If I had known, I would have been home. I'll let everyone know it was my fault." Jeff remained unmoving, his gaze still cold. I began to feel a growing sense of dread. I needed to get past this, make it up to Jeff, and shift his focus away from me. I felt exposed and unsure of myself. I had to get upstairs and change so I could address Jeff and make him forget about this. "Jeff, let me change, and then I'll tell you who was here," I started to say, but Jeff interrupted me. "Who are you with? I asked you before, and you didn't answer me. Who are you with today?" I tried to defend myself, saying, "I was by myself, like I told you." "Why are you asking me this?" But Jeff was not to be distracted. "Who were you with this afternoon for 5 hours in room 158 at the Hargrove Motel? Who were you with in that room today?" Answer me that, Samantha. Answer me that. Oh God, he knew everything. My mind was in a whirlwind, unable to function. I felt as though I was choking, my throat closing up, and my eyes burning with intense fear. Jeff was furious, and I had no idea what to do or say. I needed to act, but before I could do anything, Jeff walked toward me, reached down, grabbed the bottom edge of my top, and tore it up and over my head. I tried to cover myself, but Jeff was relentless. He grabbed my hands, pulled them apart, and then, in a shocking move, ripped open my blouse, exposing the bite marks and bruises where Harris had bitten and pinched me. The pleasure I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by pain and humiliation. I sobbed, pushed past Jeff, and ran upstairs to the bathroom, but he followed me and held the door open when I tried to close it. I cried and screamed at him to leave, but he refused to move. Inside the bathroom, I took off my tight jeans and realized my panties were missing. In my haste to leave Harris, I had inadvertently left my bra and panties behind as a reminder of our time together. Standing there naked and exposed, I saw the marks of my infidelity clear to Jeff. I had thought I had covered my tracks well and that this afternoon would remain a secret. Now, I was deeply ashamed. As I reached for my robe and put it on, trying to cover my body and hide the evidence from Jeff, I wrapped my arms tightly around my chest. I couldn't bear to look at Jeff, unable to meet the eyes that had once been warm and loving. I was embarrassed by my nakedness and ashamed for him to see me this way. I wanted to hide from his knowing gaze, but it wasn't to be. Get yourself downstairs right now. We have things to talk about, and we need to do it now. Amy and Brad are with your mother for the night. She took them when she left. They were here along with my parents for the party. Jeff, what? Jeff ignored me and walked out the door and down the stairs, leaving me standing there. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to have the conversation I knew was coming. I hoped that if I didn't go down, it wouldn't start, but I knew that was a foolish thought. I walked slowly down the stairs, holding onto the railing for support as my legs felt weak and I felt faint. I pushed aside a stack of boxes in the kitchen and sat down at the table. Jeff was already sitting there, staring at the tabletop. I felt some relief not seeing his eyes, but a tear rolling down his cheek took my breath away. How could one little tear convey so much? It told me more than 1,000 words could. I realized then how deeply my selfish actions had hurt Jeff, and my feeling of dread intensified. What do the children know, Jeff? What do they know? Please tell me, I pleaded, hoping against hope that they knew nothing. They know, Sam. I'm sorry, but they know. Why would you tell them, Jeff? Why would you hurt them before talking to me? Why would you do that? I was angry at Jeff for telling them and at myself for making it possible to hurt them. I didn't tell them, Sam. They overheard your sister tell me. It was an accident, really just a stupid accident. Patty just stumbled into it. It was her job to follow you today to make sure you didn't come home too early while we were still setting up, and then to let us know when you started for home so we could get ready to surprise you when you walked through the door. She was just protecting our surprise for you. Jeff sat up straight, his eyes locked onto mine. I noticed, without thinking, how red his eyes were. I wondered why they would be red, and then I realized, crying, of course. How stupid of me. Patty followed you, and when she saw you with some man, she became interested. She followed the two of you to your car and watched you kiss him. She said the way you were kissing him told her that something was wrong. She ran to her car and managed to follow you to the Hargrove Motel, a couple of blocks away. She watched you and that man go into room 158, and then waited for 10 minutes. When you didn't come back out, she walked up to the room and managed to peek through a gap in the curtains where they didn't fully close. She saw enough. Jeff's voice grew colder and more distant as he relayed the information Patty had given him. She drove home to tell me what she saw. She was sobbing and almost hysterical, but she didn't want to tell me. I made her sit down, take a breath, and then tell me what was bothering her. She didn't want to, knowing it would hurt me, but with everyone here waiting to surprise you, she had little choice. As Jeff spoke, I looked around and saw Amy and Brad standing there. They had heard everything. Oh God, Jeff, what did they do? What did they say? Oh God, what have I done? They were crushed when they heard Patty tell me what you were doing. Amy broke down and cried, and Brad just stood there, cursing. I didn't even try to stop him. I left them alone until they had let it all out. Once they had expressed their feelings, I tried to talk to them and calm them down. It took some time, and then I had Patty talk to your mom and dad to let them know what happened so they could handle Amy and Brad tonight. I listened in horror, realizing how everything had fallen apart so quickly and completely. One afternoon, just a simple decision to do something I had never considered before, and this was the result: my family broken, my parents and children aware of it all, and my husband hurt. Was there any hope for me? Could I put my family back together after this? I stopped my crying and tried to pull myself together. Jeff, what now? Can you ever find it in your heart to forgive me? I swear this was the first and only time I've ever done anything like this, and I promise it will never happen again. Never. I stood and walked around the table to stand next to Jeff. I placed my hand on his shoulder to comfort him, but he angrily pushed me away. I stepped back, my shock at his anger bringing a fresh wave of tears as I waited for his response. I don't think there's any way that can happen now, Sam. You see, I made a mistake today as well. When Patty told me what you were doing, I had to see for myself. I couldn't believe you would do something like that to us. So, I went to the motel myself while the party was breaking up. I parked my car and walked up to room 158 and looked for the gap in the curtains Patty mentioned. I found it and looked. Oh God, no. You didn't see me, Jeff. Please tell me you didn't see me. I saw you on that bed, him behind you, with both of his hands on you as you were consumed with lust and your face was twisted in a way I never saw before. Oh yes, Sam, I saw you, and it broke my heart. Jeff was crying openly now, tears streaming down his cheeks and dripping onto the tabletop. I saw them and knew it was too late. He got up, walked upstairs, and returned carrying 2 suitcases he had packed earlier. I'm leaving now, Sam. I'll file the papers first thing Monday morning. We can split everything evenly, including custody of the kids. Since this is a no-fault state, there shouldn't be any problem. Brad and Amy already know my intentions and have accepted them. They're old enough to manage. I don't know what you'll tell them, but I trust you with that at least. I didn't say much more than that I couldn't accept what you've done and that I need to file for this divorce. We discussed it, and they wanted to see if I could get past this, but I told them there was no way that could ever happen. Finally, they accepted it and said they would stay here with you. They're good kids and they won't hold it against you for long. They're young, and they'll forgive and forget. They will. But I can't. I'm sorry. I just can't. Jeff, please don't do this. I love you with all my heart and I'm sorry. I swear I'll do anything you ask to make this up to you. Please don't leave me like this. We have to talk to see how we can move forward and continue. We have 2 wonderful children, and they need both of us. Jeff, please give me another chance. I was sobbing and struggling to get the words out, but I had to try. I had to make one last effort, even if it was too little, too late. I had to try. But when he looked at me, and I saw the pain in his face and the lack of hope, I knew his answer. I'm sorry, Sam, but I can't do it. I can't. With that, he turned and stumbled out the door and out of my life. The divorce proceeded just as Jeff had said. A no-fault divorce means exactly that to the courts. They don't ask for counseling, although I begged Jeff's lawyer for him to join me in therapy. They don't ask for conversations and compromises, although I also begged Jeff's lawyer for those. I refused to sign until Jeff would let me talk to him, but his lawyer said the divorce would continue with or without my signature. When I wanted to discuss visitation, his lawyer said that would be decided by the court. If I objected to sharing custody, he said joint custody is common, and unless there's reason to alter that arrangement, joint means joint, and that's final. As for a conversation, Jeff refused to discuss my brief affair with Harris and said that nothing I said would change anything. He said what I did was the reason for our divorce, and the reasons behind it were unimportant to him. I had no answer for that. I never spoke to Harris again. When he heard about my divorce, he left the firm, and I never heard from him again. That was fine with me since I no longer felt anything for him. I tried to talk with Jeff, but that was quickly shut down. He wanted nothing to do with me. My kids were a problem for a while, but they soon forgave me, just as Jeff said they would. Brad was worse than Amy, but he eventually got past it, although we aren't as close as we used to be. I hope that will change with time. They are my only contact with Jeff now. He won't even talk to me when he comes to pick them up. That day, the day Jeff walked out, was my 40th birthday. That was 5 years ago, and I still remember it. I remember everything from the moment I walked into my house that day as if it were yesterday. But the hours before that are different. It's strange that I can't remember that afternoon with Harris. When I try to think about it, I get sick to my stomach, followed by a splitting headache that lasts for hours. Strange, isn't it? The most important day of my life, and I can't even remember that part of it. That's just one of the consequences of trying to remember something so terrible, it ruined your life. Unfortunately, there were many more consequences. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.